So my name is Hussein Kazal, and I'm part of the business development team. So over the past year, we've heard a lot of our customer service providers, financials, asking for a way that they can connect public workloads that are in the public cloud securely with their data centers, or if they have a branch solution, have the branch have the connectivity established with the DC and the public cloud. So what Rotem has demonstrated is that the capabilities that we already have in this NSG form factor, if we take it and virtualize it and then drop it in an AWS VPC, you get what all of you have just seen in that as a virtual branch. So your VPC essentially becomes that virtual branch where you can have network connectivity to your data center as well as the other branches. You can have security, so IPsec and security, you can securely transport data between them. And the third piece is control. So using a single management platform, you can control the connectivity of those branches as well as what lower workloads can communicate over what channel and back to the data center or the branches. So the demo, again, it's the seamless connectivity that Rotem has demonstrated extended to the public cloud. And the demo is simple. So you have a database, a web server, and a load balancer front end, and that's kind of what you have today. And as demand grows and you need to scale your web app, so you would basically go into AWS and deploy multiple VPCs with web servers. And then what's important here is that you need to have secure connectivity back to the database in the data center. And with Nuage, you basically, NSG, the VNS solution, allows you to have that secure connectivity between those VPCs and your data center. And the demo is going to be 3 parts. We'll start with the deployment piece, is how are you going to deploy the NSG in AWS, and then connect it to your network, and that's kind of what Rotem had showed briefly. And then once that's done, we will actually demonstrate how you can load balance across servers in AWS and your data center, while all of the 3 web servers are pulling information from a central database back in the data center over that.
Control through the same policy.
Exactly. And towards the end of that, we will show you how you can go back to VSD and quickly just turn, like you saw in Rotem's demo, turn on a specific port or turn off and deny traffic from a specific port, and that affects all of your instances that you spin up in AWS. So the connectivity piece, just because of, in the interest of time.
You explain this.
Yeah. So basically what you will get is an AMI from Nuage that is the NSGV, and you would deploy it as you would any other instance. And all it is basically a CentOS-based image, and you have a network side interface, and then I type really fast. That's what, and then on the access side, that's kind of the part where all of your virtual machines in that VPC will connect to. And then again, security is critical to us, so the same 1 or 2 or 0-factor authentications apply here. Is that once the VM is spun up, let me just pause this. So now that you've done the AWS piece, everybody's familiar with that piece and it's connected, then you come back to, this is the VSD, so the architect that Rotem has used, and that's where you want to basically deploy that and send the activation code so the person can activate the device that has been deployed.
Which is a virtual device in this case.
Yeah, which is all virtual. These are the 2 ports. You send that activation code. That person gets, it's this 2-factor authentication. And then once it's activated, that will be reflected back in your data center. And you can see that the ports are up. And then at any time when you're done, when this VPC has served its purpose, you can just deactivate it, and that basically VPC is no longer connected. Now the second part, now that NSGV has been deployed in AWS, how do you plumb it into the network? And that's kind of the second piece is in VPN Designer, the way you saw how those subnets were, the zones and the subnets were created and then policy was applied. I'll show you that in a bit, but once that network connectivity has been established, the application that I'm showing is going to be 2 web servers in AWS, different availability zones, and then the data center. And the database is in the data center, and there's a load balancer that is kind of doing a round robin. So every time we we do a query to the database, it will move to a different server. So here, again, this is an L3 domain. I have an AWS zone. That's where my VPCs will be. And this is my data center zone. Oh, sorry. And then I will basically drop in a subnet. That can be automated. That can be part of VPN Designer. But here I'm just doing a manual to show you the steps. I created a subnet. And then this is my NSGV that I've deployed in the VPC.
I want to hire this guy. It's fantastic.
It's called iMovie on steroids. And then once you deploy this, and you'll get a check mark that once the policy has been applied to that NSGV. And now my application is basically, I'm just demonstrating this and I'll show it to you live, but every time I do a search, it highlights which server. So now you're basically moving from the data center to each of the VPCs, and then all of them accessing the database in the VPC. So I'll just show you that here in.
Hussein,
Yes.
do you have a physical NSG at the data center that's communicating with the virtual NSGs?
Yeah, for security, yes, you can have like the VRS, but because you want to run IPsec from the data from the VPCs back, then you need an SGV in the data center as well, correct? So this is the first hit was on the server in the data center, and this is just basically a search of the zip codes of. And then now that I got the results, it moved on to the AWS Oregon VPC, and then I can do another search, and it will just do one from the Ireland web server. So that's kind of the connectivity piece. So it's as simple as just dropping in an NSGV in VPC. All of your workload, assumption is that you deploy your own workloads in the VPC. All you're asking is for connectivity to the VNS. So now the branches will have connectivity to those workloads as well as the data center. The third element that I'll just show you here as well is the control piece, and that's kind of the final piece of the demo. So right now it's port 80 and port 443 that are open. So I'm just going to go to my VSD, and then in there what I'll do is I will just go to the policy, block port 80, and then try the same test I ran again. It will just run from the data center because obviously my HA proxy and servers are in the data center, but I'm just restricting access from AWS. So the infamous. So you can see here that I've got policies port 80, I have my MongoDB access. So right now everything, the green ones are all allow. So I'm just gonna block 80. So now all my searches will not hit the AWS servers because they're blocked. Port 80 is blocked. And then instead, I'll actually have changed this to port 443, which is just the port, it's not HTTPS. So now it's serving so all of the 443 is the one that's open, 80 is blocked. So now I can just resume my search and it'll keep balancing between the.
I think also to highlight, this is, I have this turned on, I think. To highlight what it really was saying, I think is demonstrating, is the concept of creating an AMI, really. And we create an AMI of that form factor. And then thereafter, all the policy constructs we've demonstrated through VSP data center, or this in today's demos, all of a sudden start applying to endpoints that connect in that data center, in the VPC, sorry. So now you have a unified policy system that controls private data centers, virtual data centers, branch sites, and you can see now VPCs being brought up. And the classic use case that we are hearing from our customers as we discuss with them is that there's a certain load at certain times that on my front web tier 1 of that application design, I want to move those into VPC, essentially. But I cannot move my database. Because my database, either because it's physical or whether there's regulatory compliance requirements as a stay in country. So I need still the front tier 1, to connect to tier 2 in a secure manner as if it was locally present in that data center. That's exactly what I think Hussein was showing from a single policy system. I think that allows you to kind of, I think the industry calls it cloud bursting, hybrid clouds, cloud bursting. That's exactly that use case.
So is there support for other cloud service providers other than AWS?
Anyone really is just, I'm the most familiar with AWS, but yeah, I mean, again, the three things is, it doesn't matter where your workloads are, it should work. Because we're just doing that AMI, but everything else doesn't change. And the three things are obviously connectivity, security in terms of the data security and transport, as well as policy. And then the single management is important, as opposed to you having to use 3 different products and stitching them all together. And then if things change, you want to quickly turn off and on. So I think this on-demand turn up and turn down with a single management platform is critical.
One of the key things that our customers have told us is that they have IT policies that they can apply uniformly in their private DC. What they lose control of is when they go to AWS or GCE, they are not able to apply those same uniform policies that are for that enterprise, for their public workloads in AWS or GCE. This is how you get them to apply the same exact policies to both workloads. This is a huge relief for the CIOs and IT admins to let now their users burst into AWS, use those workloads, but be assured that the same exact policies of the enterprise are always applied to those workloads.
Now, are you on the controller when you're doing that, or on the gateway when you were setting those policies before?
That's the VSD. That's the VSD. That's the highest tier. So VSD, the controller's in the middle, and then the distributed routing and switching in the NSGV. So all of the policy management happens at the top tier, which is the VSD.
Right. Although the philosophy, in VNS and also in VSP, although a user can go into any one of these tiers, start adding, removing things, we really try to make sure that all capabilities are exposed at the highest layer. So if you don't want to, you can just do all that. And that's exactly what Hussein has done, expose those policies at the policy layer only. And the system automatically in runtime discovered that now I have a site, not only at the branch, but discovered that there's a site in AWS. Joined it to the right VPN, applied the policies at runtime without the user having to do that. And to add on what Sunil was saying, a network administrator or a CIO, in a sense, can create templated policies to to make sure that when users actually deploy things, they cannot go outside those policies. They cannot go into an AWS environment and create their own policies and change. He can lock them down to the point where he's assured that anything that sits in that environment is quite compliant with enterprise IT systems. Yeah.
And the other piece that's kind of not visible is that all of what you have seen, there's a REST API that you can program your own portal on top. So if you already have a way to program deployment of your assets in AWS, so we provide the northbound RESTful API that you can just use to do all the things that you just saw in the GUI. So it's another way to, everything is programmable, everything is automated, and if you have a layer on top that you just kind of drop hours in and then you just leverage all of those. So just in summary, I guess, what you have seen in this demo is initial connectivity, seamless connectivity of this, an extension of SD-WAN between the branch, the data center, and the public cloud. The security aspect of it, of whether it's policy and what talks to what and through which port or interface, and in the end, the single management platform. So you still have control. You're not sacrificing control or security because you're going into public cloud. So.
What are you saying with customer, teams? You mentioned larger enterprises. Those guys typically have multiple teams. The SD-WAN team isn't doing data center. That's one of the reasons the market is doing so well, because you're bypassing all the politics from data center team, storage, compute, network working together. So I think it's slick technology-wise, but even containers on the edge, just in terms of who owns that app? Do they want it on this device that's sort of not controlled by those teams? So what are you seeing with the interactions with larger customers?
I was saying, if I can jump in. Yeah, that's a great point. And then I think I was alluding to what we spoke about with Matt earlier on. The top use cases that we're hearing, and I've listed them, are more network centric, and I think that's the point that was made. Are more network centric apps that are first instance being deployed there, and that's I think symbolic of the function that the networking guys potentially own this space right now.
No, I get it, but the store apps wasn't network centric, so it was,
that app was to show you where things potentially could go. Which one to kind of stretch the imagination and show you where things potentially could go in the future.
But even with SD-WAN versus data center, those two alone are totally.
No, but Jason, that's you're bringing up an excellent point. These are the organizational silos, if you will.
Right.
And as you said, oftentimes, the SD-WAN implementation happens completely in isolation with the data center. But what we are now in the midst of, and this is what I alluded to earlier, I was with a customer 3 weeks ago, and they have almost every large enterprise customer today has 2 projects ongoing. One is to modernize their data center, automate it and make it programmable, allow for people to burst out with a common policy. And the second project, almost everywhere, is a branch refresh project. And so while there might be 2 teams, it all gets connected at the top in a way that they want, and it's those organizational boundaries have to come down. It's going to take time. But what they want to do is, it may be that they implement Nuage separately, a separate instance of Nuage in the wide area, and a separate in the data center. Sure. But that's an advantage that we have, because we can ultimately bring that together when the organizational boundaries go down. So but you're right. I mean, oftentimes we'll see these implemented in isolation.
Do you see the SD-WAN play as a quicker, easier way to get into an enterprise customer without having to do this whole massive data center, virtualization, automation?
Look, when it comes to very large enterprises, they have already gone down the path of virtualizing their data center assets, right? So they've been waiting for the automation that they need in their data centers. So they are absolutely doing that. For the branch refreshes that are going on, yes, it can be fast-tracked because, the business case is quite easy, especially with the existing branch networking in place. But at the same time, it all depends upon what their ultimate goal is in terms of what they need in terms of the network services, how they want to connect those network services, and where they want to connect those network services. So it could be that that happens quicker, but we have an advantage that every customer that is deployed, the 25 plus customers that have deployed the Nuage data center solution, every single of those customers is now trialing our VNS solution. Every one of those customers, we are engaged in that. So it helps us. They already have the VSD. They already have the VSC. All they need is, instead of the VRS, now they need an NSG. So once they have operationalized those things, they need the NSG. So that also helps us to accelerate those deployments.